Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of The Push with Nick and KP. I'm KP and here today we're going to be running through an NXT recap. This is from the March 31st edition of the show, live from the Madison Square Garden Theatre in New York. This is the NXT Go Home show before we see Stand and Deliver take place this coming Saturday. So how about we get down to all the action that took place across the course of the night, go through everything, and start from the very top of the show. So we would begin things with a tag team matchup, 3-on-3 action here as Dark State took on the team of OTM and Mike Santana. This will be an opportunity for Mike and OTM to really just sort of like stick it to Dark State, who have had a pretty torrid time of late. They've had some absolutely stinking luck. And it didn't really get any better in this contest either. The matchup is quite physical here. It's a pretty big battle between six men, to be fair. Very physical affair from everybody involved. We see a situation with the end where Mike Santana, he's absolutely rolling, hits a spin the block on Sugars, then goes for a Topicon Hilo, knocking down Lennox and Osiris on the outside. OTM, they're in the ring. They clear things up by taking out Sugars with a tag team maneuver to get their victory in this matchup and secure the dub. So yeah, big win here for OTM. They've been in and around the tag team title situation. Obviously, this isn't anything for that particularly. That'll be our next matchup of the night. But in terms of just getting momentum and just keeping things smooth, OTM did a good job here of keeping that momentum running. Mike Santana, the TNA champion, getting involved here as well, was a great little cameo for him. And very impressive performance from all six men here. Put on a good matchup. But if the talking point here really is Dark State. They were once at the top of the division, really, just firing on all cylinders, and now they've had absolutely no luck. They've got an injured guy, and they've had loss after loss after loss recently, so things are not improving for them anytime soon by the looks of things. But a good win for OTM and Mike Santana. Coming up after that, we would go on to our next matchup of the night, which would see a tag team contest. Number one contenders match for the NXT Tag Team Championships. Winners would face the Vanity Project at Stand and Deliver. We would see the Los Americanos team of Rayo and Bravo taking on Birthright of Channing Stacks Lorenzo and Uriah Connors. This would be a pretty fun tag team matchup. We'd see the rest of Birthright on the outside, Lexus King, Charlie Dempsey, Ariana Grace, all sort of like getting involved in parts here and there, causing distractions and things like that. It gets to a stage though in the contest where after a pretty big back and forth matchup between the two teams, we see Shiloh Hill, who obviously was at sort of the odd ends to Birthright last week in that North American Championship Gauntlet contest, and he would come on down looking for a bit of revenge. He would actually get rid of all three of the outside members of Birthright, and would basically fend them off with a steel chair, sending them to the back, just keeping it a tag team match between the four men in the ring. That wouldn't be the case for the entire contest, though, because as we would get to our closing stages, El Grande Americano would head up onto the apron, distracting the referee here, which would allow a moment for Rayo and Bravo to put some plates into their masks, and then they would don those new plated masks, hitting a couple of headbutts on their respective opponents here in this matchup, and that would see the victory here for Los Americanos, taking advantage of the situation and becoming your number one contenders for the NXT Tag Team Championships. They will take on Vanity Project at Stand and Deliver. Rayo and Bravo with a very big win here. They only came down as sort of like a last-minute replacement for an injured team in this tournament, and here they are now as your number one contenders for the NXT Tag Team titles. Big win here for Los Americanos. After that one, we would see a one-on-one matchup between Jada Parker and Kalani Jordan. This rivalry sort of like hitting a big boiling point over recent times. And this will be a pretty good matchup, to be fair. Very sort of indicative of the offense here that we would see in this matchup. Very authoritative from both ladies here, just trying to go about their business and try to take down the other lady. And it gets to a stage in the end where actually a really nice closing sequence here. Both ladies are up on the top rope, sort of like in the turnbuckles situation. And we see Jada Parker taking advantage of Kalani Jordan, has her stunned up there, hits an avalanche German suplex, which just absolutely flips her over. She lands face first onto the canvas, does Jordan. And then we see Jada Parker not slowing down, hits the hypnotic straight afterwards, and then ends the match via a sit-out spinebuster, which Vic Joseph calls Deja Vu. Not sure if that's the official name for the move, but maybe it could be. And then that would pick up the victory here for Jada Parker. So yeah, that's not the last we see of the two throughout the night. At a later part of the show, we do see these two sort of brawling backstage as well. So clearly this is not done. We're obviously going to roll it back again at some point. But for the time being, Jada Parker gets a victory here. So yeah, very sort of aggressive feud we've got going on here. But Miss Parker comes out with a win. Coming up next, we would have a NXT Championship Fatal 4-Way contract signing hosted by Robert Stone. This would see the likes of Joe Hendry, the champion, as well as Ethan Page, Ricky Sainz, and Tony D'Angelo all signing the contract in various different parts of this segment. So we'd start off this one basically by Ethan and Ricky. They try and get each other to sign the contract first, sort of like a bit of a, after you segment. Joe Hendry sort of stops that from going any further, takes the contract himself, and just signs it immediately. He then says he's looking forward to seeing who stabs who in the back first out of Hendry and Saints, and he calls them both desperate to become the NXT champion, and that he himself is passionate to be the champ. Ricky tells Hendry not to worry about his and Ethan's friendship before signing the contract himself and declaring that he'll become a 2-time NXT champion. Ethan Page says that he was reminded of his true value recently by Ricky Saints and that he's the best in WWE, so he will be the one that will become the 2-time NXT champion. He then signed the contract, and then after a little bit of a dispute between the two men, Ricky and Ethan, D'Angelo stops them both from bickering before saying that he's the only one not to hold the NXT title out of the 4 in the ring, and that Stand and Deliver, he's going to run everyone over like a freight train. He signs the contract before then advising Robert Stone to leave the ring, as we all know how these things go. People normally go through tables during contract signings. This one's no different, except for this time there are 2 tables in the ring, so we get 2 men that go through tables. Page launches Henry through a table, and D'Angelo does the same to Ricky Saints before they brawl amongst themselves in the ring. We see sort of like officials, security members, whatever, coming on in and breaking them up, sort of like trying to keep them separate. And that will see the end of this segment as we very swiftly would move then into a transition to our next segment of the night, which will go from half 1 to half 2. So, Keanu Carver, he would go one-on-one with Jasper Troy in our next matchup of the night. This would be a pretty quick contest, extremely physical affair here. We'd see the action spill to ringside pretty early into the contest, and we would see Jasper Troy actually put Keanu Carver through a table after he had sort of had an interaction with a fan at ringside, after sort of like getting in the face of both Vic Joseph and Booker T. Obviously, we know the history between Keanu Carver and Booker over the last few weeks. But yeah, that interaction with the fan was quite interesting. Jasper Troy comes on down to the situation, ends up putting Carver through that announce table, rolls him back into the ring, and then hits a black hole slam. Only gets a count of 2, though. Carver does kick out before 3. Troy vents his frustration to the special guest referee, who is Josh Briggs in this contest, and he ends up just sort of shoving Josh Briggs. After that interaction between both men, Carver is able to capitalize once Briggs kicks Jasper Troy. He hits him with a running power slam, and that would pick up the victory here for Keanu Carver in this match. Carver demands his hand be raised by Josh Briggs afterwards, but Josh doesn't really want to do that. He very reluctantly does it, but then he hits Keanu with a very big clothesline afterwards, and that would see him stand tall above the 2 other giant men in the ring. So yeah, very physical segment, this one, but a pretty fun one, to be fair. Had a couple of layers to it, and Josh Briggs definitely isn't one to shy away from the big brutes of NXT. So yeah, I like this one. Pretty good segment. Not a bad matchup at all. Even though it was quick, it was impactful. Coming up after that, we would then have a promo from Tatum Paxley, the actual NXT Women's North American Champion, although she didn't have a title to prove it. She would say how good last week felt when she had her hold of Blake Monroe and her hair. She requests for Monroe to come down to the ramp and give her title back. We then see Blake Monroe arriving pretty much instantly afterwards. She said that she has no issues with Paxley, actually, before saying that she never lost the Women's North American Championship in the first place. She says she can't give it back to Tatum because she just doesn't want to do it. Like, it's her prized possession. Paxley weighs back in, basically saying that, you know, you have something that I want, I also have something that you want, and that in itself is a Stand and Deliver matchup. She says that the show of Stand and Deliver should have Monroe be a part of it, before then requesting a match against Blake. Blake does sort of treat this one as a proposal to a matchup, because she instantly just says, yeah, I accept your challenge, yeah, we'll do this matchup. And it sort of is like a tempting sort of persuasive tactic here by Tatum Paxley, which Blake Monroe eats up completely. Once she does accept, she does warn Paxley that they're opposite stars in the ring and out. She says that Paxley belongs in the crowd with the deathly New Yorkers, before then Paxley said that she's not going to be blinded by circus-level crap. She says that she can be the god to Blake's glamour and the fire to her hell, before demanding the title back. The two start a fight in the ring. Paxley sees Monroe off out of the ring, clears her from there, But Blake does manage to steal that title again, and then she does escape with the title still in the clutches. So yeah, pretty much no further forth here, except for I guess we know that the matchup is definitely official. But a bit of an interaction between the two ladies, lower personalities coming out here, and a nice little meshing of the two in the ring. So yeah, quite enjoyed the segment actually. Thought it worked pretty well. It's just one of those weird situations where maybe the match wasn't official, but it definitely is now. So yeah, we're getting the match up. Tatum still doesn't have her title at the moment. Blake's still keeping it close away from Tatum. So, going from one confusing situation to a very confusing situation in our main event of the show, this will see Kendall Grey go one-on-one with Lola Vice to determine a number one contender for the NXT Women's Championship. Jacyjayne, your current champion, currently at this point doesn't have a challenger for Stand and Deliver. This will see a chance for these two ladies to change that. Kendall Grey and Lola Vice put on an extremely good matchup. They go back and forth so many times during this one. So much involved here. Athleticism, power, technical abilities, submission, grappling, everything you can really ask for in a technical bout here. It's got it all. It's a great women's matchup. It's a great showcase of both ladies. And we get to a stage in the contest where Lola Vice locks in a guillotine onto Kendall Grey. She fights through the guillotine hold, sort of like, trying to sort of like relieve the pressure of the legs from around her midsection. She does so. They get to a standing position and things like that. And it gets to a stage where after a bit of fighting and back and forth, up and down sort of styles of the hold, we then see Kendall Grey able to hit a Northern Lights suplex, which then puts Lola's shoulders onto the canvas. Just before this has happened as well, Fatal Influence are on the outside of the ring. They're all watching the situation here, seeing who's going to win the contest, and there's a referee sort of keeping them from the action. That's quite important because when shoulders of Lola Vice go down onto the canvas from that Northern Lights, we then see the referee in the ring counting to 3. He does go to the 3 count, so at that point you think that Lola Vice has been pinned by Kendall Grey, but the referee on the outside spots a tap from Kendall Grey, who taps. It looks like she taps on the count of 2. So because one referee notices the tap, one referee counts the pinfall, we then have sort of like a contrasting sort of opinion here from the two officials. And because of that situation, it's all a bit confusing in the ring. We then see Lola Vice and Kendall Grey getting up in sort of like arms about the situation. Both referees are bickering. We see Shawn Michaels coming on down. And there's just mass confusion. It's just, there's no real decision made here. And you think normally, in this case, a decision will be made before the show goes off the air. Not in this case. There was no decision made. So we do not know who won this matchup. We don't know what the decision is. We don't know what Jacyjayne's doing at Stand and Deliver. At this point, it could be a triple threat. That seems to be the likely situation here. But also, I mean, technically speaking, Kendall Grey taps on the count of 2. So with that being the case, she taps before the 3 count happens. Therefore, in my opinion, Lola Vice is the number one contender. But I guess we just don't know. We'll have to wait and see what happens at Stand and Deliver. I guess we'll get an update before then or at that show regardless. But yeah, we didn't get it on this episode of NXT, which is a really weird ending. Probably one of the weirdest endings to a wrestling show I've ever seen. So yeah, no real idea what's happening. We'll have to wait and find out. But in terms of NXT as general, pretty solid show. I think the issue with Stand and Deliver was that it's probably a little bit too soon in the calendar. We recently had the last event for NXT, and there hasn't been a long time to build since then, so it does feel a little bit rushed in parts. Number one contenders being crowned sort of like literally on the go home show, so there's no real build between them to sort of like build up the matches. Yeah, that happened on a couple of occasions, and obviously with the confusion at the end here as well, very strange situation for sure. But I think regardless of that, though, it is still a good show, and they do put a lot of effort into sort of like trying to make Stand and Deliver big, because there are a lot of matches that have been announced for that show, so it looks like it's going to be absolutely stacked. So I can't wait for that. But for this episode of NXT, I'll probably give it a 7.5 out of 10. Like I say, it's just a bit confusing for me. It's good, but it's confusing. And maybe that's just me. Maybe it's a personal opinion. But for now, this has been the recap of NXT for March 31st edition of the show, the Go Home edition before Stand and Deliver. Let us know in the comments, guys, what you think of this one. Whether you thought it was confusing, whether you think, Lola Vice, the number contender, whether you think it's Kendall Grey, and any others in between. We'd love to hear what you're thinking about this episode of the show. For those of you that have been following us, we do appreciate the continued support. Please continue to do that by liking our video here. And for those that are new, subscribing to our channel, keeping up with future releases coming up at a later date. But for now, this has been The Push with Nick and KP. We'll see you all next time. Take it easy, and goodbye for now.